What's up, chess player? The game you are about to see is one of the most incredible games Bobby Fischer has ever played. And not only I'm gonna walk you through and show you why it was such a fantastic chess player, but I'm gonna explain how you could use the same principles in your own chess games. So let's get started. Bobby Fischer played this game as black against René Letellier, and the game started with the moves d4, knight f6, c4, and g6. That is the King's Indian defense, the first moves of it, the opening that Bobby loved so much along with the Sicilian defense against e4, because those openings are probably the most dynamic you have in black's disposal. It allows you to create an unbalanced situation as fast as possible, and that is exactly when a stronger player can outplay a weaker one very, very fast. So let's see what happened in this game. White has a total control of the game. In fact, here he's playing e5, which is nowadays considered to be a premature move. And back in the time, Fischer also said in his notes that this move is not that great. Why? Well, it seems like White has a perfect pawn center here, but the problem is that in chess, it doesn't work that way if you're just pushing your pawns forward and your pieces are not supporting it. And in this case, that is exactly what's happening, because the only piece developed is this knight on c3, and your king is in the center now completely naked, while black's king is already castled and completely safe. And so now black is free to attack the center, to create a lot of problems for it. And that is exactly what Fischer does. Let's see how he manages to do that. So first of all, d6, we need to put some pressure on this e5 pawn. We need to break through this center, because otherwise, of course, it's very solid. You can't just get through with your pieces. So bishop e3, and now the next move is even more aggressive from Fischer here, c5. He doesn't care about the number of the pawns. All he cares about is just to open up the center, because then his pieces are gonna make a difference, and his king, this king in the center would be a liability for white. So what happened here is d takes c, and this d6 pawn is suddenly pinned. You can't take in neither of the pawns because your queen is going to be lost. But it's not a problem. Like I said, it's not about the pawns, it's about opening up the position. So what Fischer does is just developing new pieces. Development is always the key in chess to success, and that is exactly what's happening here. If you just compare how powerful this bishop is. This knight is now attacking the pawn and protecting the queen. The second bishop is about to be developed. This knight, even though it seems like it's a very passive one, once all of those exchanges are going to happen, it could jump right into the center, and so black is much more ready to attack the opponent. C takes d, white continues to grab all of the pawns, being as greedy as possible, and yeah, probably that is still the best thing to do, but he already needs to be very careful, because, well, white has an extra pawn, but the engine evaluation is about equal. What it means? It means that black's pieces activity compensates that extra pawn, and that means that black has the initiative here. So white should be very, very careful with all of the threats, and that's not what happened in this game. Let's see how it happened. So knight a4, instead of developing a new piece, which is what I'm always teaching you in my videos, white is making the second move with the same piece, and that is very often leads to bad consequences. And that is why I recommend you never do it in your games unless you absolutely need it. So the best case scenario is to spend just one move per one piece. That way you can develop all of the pieces as fast as possible, and of course make sure that your king is in safety. So let's see what happened here. Bishop f5, developing yet another piece, and even though chess.com says it's a inaccuracy here, but I really like that move, because look at those bishops, how powerful they are here, controlling all of the diagonals. I'm pretty sure I would have made the same move here. Knight to g3, making yet another move with the same knight. That is why I don't like the move knight e4 at all. I mean, you could have taken on d6 here, but that would require opening up the diagonal, and then, yeah, the bishop would be just a monster there with the support of this one, probably winning some material for black. So knight g3, just bishop e6 back. Of course, we never want to exchange our bishop for a knight. Remember, please, the bishop is stronger than the knight in the majority of the cases, especially if you have an open position, when you have some diagonals to attack like this one. And yes, to do that, to secure our bishop, we need to make a second move with the same piece, but only because it's really required. Otherwise, we never do that. So knight f3, finally developing another piece, but black is already better because it's so difficult to deal with all of those threats here. Just queen c7. Of course, we don't want to take on e5 immediately because, yes, we are going to get the pawn back, but we are going to allow the queen's exchange. And when you have the initiative, if you want to attack your opponent, you never want to exchange the pieces in general and the queens in particular, because that's going to make it so much simpler for your opponents to deal with all of your threats. So queen c7 has been played instead, and now queen to b1. Quite a weird move, trying to somehow bring the queen into the game, but once again, it's very, very slow, and you remember that the time is the most important thing in chess. Let's see how Fischer uses it. So d takes e has been played. Yeah, he's getting the pawn back, but also he just wants to continue the plan, which is to open up the center to give some space for his pieces. f5. That is the point of the move queen to b1. Now white is trying to still shut this bishop down and create some counterplay. Counterplay in chess is probably the most important thing. Nowadays we understand it, but well, 50 years ago, it was not that obvious that you always need to create some source of counterplay, because if you stay passive, be sure that one day your opponent will come after you and just gonna kill you. So what happened here is e4, and yeah, as chess.com says, it's a mistake, but once again, it's a very active move. It's creating a counter threat, and that is very important in chess as well. It's making life more difficult for your opponent, and you're not playing against computer. I hope you're not, because personally I don't get this thing at all. It's so miserable. But when you're playing against people, it's so difficult to deal with all of the threats you're creating, and that is exactly what happened here, because the knight is hanging, the pawn is hanging here, so the right move is here queen takes to e4. And then bishop takes f5, the position is going to be opened, and of course it's so scary when you have a king in the center. So white decided, well, I'm going to rather take on e6 here and try to still close the position. Pawn takes on f3, and then instead of taking the pawn back, black plays here f5, just continuing creating threats with every move. That is so important. It's making, once again, the life so difficult for your opponent. Because f4 is a threat, the queen is coming to e5, where it's going to be attacking the bishop and pinning it, and of course attacking the b2 pawn, just in case. So f4 has been played, seemingly dealing with all of those threats, but it's weakening a lot of white squares, and that is of course also an important thing. Now knight goes back to f6. Remember what I have told you about this knight, that seemingly it was passive, but it was always ready to jump back into the game. And that is what happens here. Knight f6 is even better than knight d6 in this case, because we have a beautiful g4 square, which is very vulnerable for white, and from there the knight can attack the bishop, and yeah, of course that would make it even more difficult for white to handle. Bishop e2 has been played in order to deal with this threat, and now rook e8. Notice that Fischer is trying to develop all of the pieces, and that is the key, because lower-rated players oftentimes forget to finish the development. They start with some inspiration, yes, the knights, the bishops, but at some point they just forgot and just going all in basically with just a handful of their pieces. Instead, it's always better to bring all of your players into the pitch and then start your attack. So that is what's happening here, king to f2, because, well, trying to support those bishops with the king itself. In fact, that is not such a great move. Let's see why. Rook takes e6, and now you could see that there is some pressure along the e file. Rook to e1 has been played, and the second rook comes. Now we have a beautiful position where all of the black pieces are developed. And look at this rook on a1. It's a completely miserable piece which is there offside of the game, not taking part at all. So bishop to f3, yes, the bishop is pretty good here, also protecting the bishop on e3. But yeah, there is something special happening here. Rook takes e3, rook sacrifice. The point is, of course, to weaken white's position, to exchange those active pieces. So The recipe for success in a situation when you have the initiative is to exchange your opponent's active pieces and to leave him with only his passive pieces. And that would allow you to continue the attack with your active pieces. Of course, you should make sure that you still have it. And so your opponent will have nothing to deal with your attack. So rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, king takes, and now it's time for you to find the next move for black here. Pause the video for a second, I guarantee you're gonna enjoy it and find the best move for black. I hope you took your time and you have found the right move here. It's a brilliant move, it's a queen sacrifice, queen takes f4. And the point is, of course, after king takes, what has been played in the game, there is bishop h6 with a checkmate. And notice how important is that all of black pieces are participating in the game here. Even this pawn is not allowing the king to escape. And this bishop is very, very strong. But if you escape, so that is how the game ended. But if you try to escape, of course, there are more pieces here taking part. Knight to g4 with another check. The bishop is pinned. The king should go back. If you try to go to g2 to still protect the bishop, then we have knight to e3 check, king goes back, and now the second knight is coming. How important is it to use all of your pieces? That is why I wanted to demonstrate this game. Because you need to coordinate all of your pieces as a one very, very solid team here. And then there is no chance to defend this bishop except for queen to h1, going to the opposite side of the board. But then, of course, knight comes to g4 with another check, and there is no way to save the bishop. If you go to g2, I'm taking it with a queen. If you go somewhere back, like, I don't know, f1 or e1, then I can just take at least here, having two pieces for the rook, and yeah, checkmate is still coming, so black is totally crushing. I hope you enjoyed this game, because if you want to get better, you need to learn from the best. And in this video, I demonstrate you another completely spectacular game from Bobby Fischer, and I guarantee you're gonna become a better chess player after watching this video.